People think mental health, they think it's not real. They think it's just a weakness in your character. I had a stronger will if I just tried harder. And then people will say, well, is it all in my head? I go, well, now some people will say, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Giving a kid a pill. Oh my gosh, what are you kidding? You're just a kid. You're just a kid. Why would you do it? Well, because it's really important that people understand that it's not a weakness to take medication. It's actually a
The test begins. As you pick up your pencil, something outside catches your eye. Your mind wanders. Someone tapping their shoe snaps you back to the test, then to the clock. Where did the time go? You look down at your paper, it's blank. Suddenly, it hits you. There's no time left. That sinking feeling hits. I am going to fail again. This is an example of ADD, attention deficit disorder, which is a neurodevelopment disorder that affects a person's ability to focus, stay on task, and regulate impulses. This is a story Dr. Corona knows all too well. From ADHD to anxiety, depression to bipolar disorder, Dr. Corona has spent his career helping people, me included, reclaim their authentic lives. In his latest of several books, The Corona Protocol, featured in the Emmy Swag Bag, and his TV show, The Dr. Corona Show, Dr. Corona continues to dedicate his life to the study and education of neurological disorders. Come on, how can someone who's never experienced it truly understand it all? Well, Dr. Corona himself has dealt with his own disorders, so he's not just speaking as an expert, he's speaking from experience. Raw and real, here is Dr. Paul Corona. I am even more thrilled to have you here and talk about your early beginnings and how your focus was on family medicine. What prompted you to turn your focus into exploring chemical imbalances, which I have? How did you make that transition?
Well, when I first started in even medical school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I thought initially pediatrics. I thought at some point OBGYN. I just didn't know, and so I basically chose family practice because I just didn't know. I liked psychiatry. I liked a bunch of things, and so I thought, well, the family practice sounds like it's good because it would give me a broad range of things to deal with, and so that's why I chose. And I did 3-year training on that. I started practicing in 1992, and I love being a family doctor, but I was always really interested in psychiatry and mental health, and during the 90s, I just got more and more into it. A lot of it, everyone's heard of SSRIs like Zoloft, Lexapro, Prozac. That's all they had available when I first started practice. And then a groundbreaking medication came out called Effexor, the first actually serotonin and norepinephrine medication, not just serotonin. And that's when I really started to see, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because I started to see better results with anxiety and with stress. And I also saw physical changes. So I started seeing my patients saying, my headaches, my neck, my back, my shoulders, my stomach, all those things I used to have when I was stressed out, they've gone away. So I started seeing this physical link. And I think as a family doctor, I was seeing that where maybe a lot of maybe psychiatrists didn't see that because they're not really focusing on the body, the physical stuff like we do. And most family doctors don't get really as into it as me, so they don't have as much experience. So I during the 90s, I just did more and more and more of this. I started understanding it, how to combine medications together. A lot of it was just self-taught. I read psychiatric textbooks. I tried to learn as much as I could about what I was doing. But then I realized, after about a decade of practice that, that I was doing so much more of this than regular primary care. And that's when I made the decision around the year 2000 to 2002, right in that range, to switch my practice over and kind of give up on primary care and move full-time into mental health.
So many of us deal with mental health. For me personally, it was, anxiety, and your help with me personally has been amazing. And then I don't know if we're going to go into the ADHD, but I also have that too. And how many times I've said to you 1,000 times, I don't want to take it. And then I'll stop taking my Adderall, I have a low dose, and I'll start something new, and I'll come running back to you because, things are starting to go haywire. And you're like, well, what did you do this time, Tracey? I tried Neurogum. And I'm like, And it's partly because I feel like a drug addict. Just, I hate that feeling of having to take something. And if you could just walk us through the way you explained it to me. I loved when you said it to me. And again, I just went through this with you. I stopped taking it because I'm like, I'll try some homeopathic medicine because every time I go to the pharmacy, I feel like they're giving me the side eye and it feels poopy. So I want you to walk through, if you could, how you explain what the mind does with the chemical.
Well, usually what I do with my patients, I draw diagrams of neurons. I explain like how neurochemicals cross over the cell to cell. But I think the main issue really here is that people don't take when people think mental health, they think it's not real. They think it's just a weakness in your character. I have stronger will if I just tried harder. And then people will say, "Well, is it all in my head?" I go, "Well, what's in your head? Isn't that where your brain is?" Well, yeah, it's in your brain. Well, no. I mean, is it all in my head? Meaning, am I just making it up, or am I just being weak? No. It's a medical problem. But see, it doesn't, since we don't have blood tests. So if someone had a thyroid condition or diabetes or whatever, you do blood tests and show it to them. They go, "Okay, I'll take my thyroid supplement and I'll do this." People don't have a problem with it because it's even more medical. Now, when it comes to mental, people think it's just not the same. What doesn't help the situation is like podcasters, not you, but I mean, I heard a small clip from, I don't listen to Joe Rogan, but I heard a small clip of his that someone sent me. And he had a doctor on who had ADD. And so he's going off about ADD medications. Oh, I think it's horrible. And the doctor stops and goes, "Wait a minute, I'm on one." And Joe stops and he said, "Well, oh, really?"
And then you have the child raising their hand, and then you have everyone clapping, and you have the child with a big smile on their face, and you've medicated your child to be a successful and integrated person in society.
Shall I spot off about ADHD for a minute?
Yes, please.
That was my first book on ADHD. It's the American Scattered Minds, depending on which edition you get. And that was after I was diagnosed with it myself in my 50s.
What does it mean?
ADHD?
Yeah, what is it exactly? Is it real?
Oh, it's real.
He said, "Oh, it doesn't make you wired." He goes, "No, it calmed the brain down. No, it helped." And then Joe said, "Okay." And the other thing tried to create is anxiety. Oh, but are we all anxious? Don't we all have stress? So the problem is belittling the condition with someone like as powerful as he is with that far of a reach, or like a Jack Tatum who's like this macho dude with the podcast and all that. These kind of people, and even not just them, but also other kind of mainstream people just don't get it, and so people feel shamed about it. And like you said, and pharmacies don't help. People say they look at me kind of funny, like, "Why do you need Adderall? Are you taking this for weight loss or whatever?" So pharmacists make it more difficult because they shame people. And so I don't. It's understandable why you would do this. You try Neurogam, you try Focus Factor. People get on supplements of some type. Do some of them work a little bit? Yeah, I mean they can help somewhat. They help a little bit, not as well as the prescription ones. No way.
No.
But they do help a little bit. But sometimes it's just a matter of, but don't you want something that's going to work better? And the fact it's a medication, so what? People take medication for a lot of things. Why not? I think once I explain it and I explain that the neurochemical got a balance for reasons you have no control over, which also causes anxiety, which is the number one thing I see in my practice is anxiety disorders. It's all based on imbalances that you can't help. Now, why do they happen in the first place? Genetics. Okay, number one, runs in your family. So if I look into people's family's history, mom, dad, probably your mom or your dad, I don't have your chart in front of you, but probably one of them has ADD. You may not know who, but one of them probably does. One or both of them, maybe one of them has an anxiety issue.
My mom was bipolar, anxiety, and obviously she was probably the person who passed it down to me. But also, I think you're going to probably go into it, but trauma isn't that a base of the ADHD as well?
Right. And you're not bipolar. I mean, and you got perfection out here. You from your dad's side, so you don't get everything, but you get a little bit from mom, a little bit from dad, and both of their sides. And then second factor is hormone changes. So some women, especially, will see problems, like a lot of problems start at puberty, middle school, premenstrual, postpartum, menopause. So women have it a little bit rougher. You guys have more hormonal changes during your life than men do. And then trauma, stressors. So sometimes trauma tips the scale and sets things off. So the reasons that happens, no one can control that. So I think it's really important that people understand that it's not a weakness to take medication. It's actually a strength. The fact that you can stand up and really treat the disorder the way it should be treated. But people have difficulty because no one wants to take a pill. Everyone wants to take all natural supplements and vitamins, and they think, well, if pharmaceutical, I want to stay away from the pharmacy. I want to just do it through a supplier or through the health food store or whatever.
Well, someone was asking me, what is it like when you take the medication, when you don't take the medication? And I likened it to, there's this superhero that can hear everything and he cannot go to sleep. And I don't know the name of the superhero, but when you're not taking it, everything it feels like you can feel and hear everything. And when the superhero goes to sleep, he has to go underwater, so it blocks it out. And so it kind of feels like that. It blocks everything out except what you're focusing on. It's like there's a protective bubble around you. And this is how I feel. And you can tell me if you've heard from other clients. And you're able to focus. The bells ringing, the lights, everything is not stealing my focus, the squirrel. And when I'm trying all these homeopathic things like Neurogum or whatever, there's no bubble. There might be a small haze, maybe. Like you said, it works a little bit, but I can tell when I'm using the medication and I take a small dose. I remember when you first got me started on it, one of my teachers was like, wow, you're looking at me. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, when you talk, you're just not looking at anyone. You don't it feels like you're not listening because you're thinking of 1,000 different things. And she's like, what's going on? I started this medication and it was life-changing for me it's a no wonder that I have a company, because it was later in life that I actually was diagnosed with ADHD. I guess it's the hyperfocus that we have as ADHDers, our superpower. But back to what you were saying about Joe Rogan, I just wanted to throw back. I'm actually a big fan of Joe Rogan. People forget to walk in other people's shoes, and I'm guilty of that as well. My man, he didn't believe in mental illness. He had never experienced it, so he couldn't understand it. And so he was one along that line of like, that's ridiculous, get over it, get strong. Until he had a surgery and he had a full-blown anxiety attack, and he had a couple. And his whole perspective changed. He was like, it felt like I was dying, like I was being smothered to death. It was the most horrible feeling. I go, imagine what some people deal with when they deal with that every day. He's like, I couldn't imagine.
Then you got it.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges in a relationship? I can tell you what my challenges have been, but what would you say challenges are in a relationship with people who have ADHD?
Well, I think communication. I think what you mentioned just a little bit ago is listening skills. So a lot of times with ADD, it's people interrupt, or they just see a thought come to the head, boom, it comes out without sitting back and saying, let me just wait for that person to finish what that says, and then I can talk. It's just boom, the communication can be more difficult. Well, let's talk about the features. Poor focus and concentration, that one. Easy distractibility, like you said, squirrel, the teacher's talking, there's a bird flying out the window over there, and then they're looking at the trees, and the teacher's talking over here, and just not even really hardly listening, because they're just focused on other things besides what they're or people at their desk and they're trying to work on something and then they get distracted. So easily distracted is a very common one. Impulsiveness, doing things impulsively without thinking. And so these are the features. And again, the main reason is genetics, like I told you, and so it's challenging sometimes in relationship, but the main thing is the communicating, and the other person, the non-ADD person, just getting very frustrated. Why can't you just listen or look me in the eye when you're talking or whatever? But that's probably the biggest challenge.
What would you give as advice to a couple that one has the ADHD, one does not, because it is incredibly and frustrating, and communication is the foundation of all relationships, what would be your advice?
Read about it, understand it. So the not well, both people need to understand. Not both of the people who happily doesn't. They need it's a matter of really understanding, and so reading about it. I mean, in my new book, The Current Protocol, I have a whole chapter on it, on ADD. So if someone wants to delve into it and understand it, I talk about 3 different cases, and that the whole new book it's 30 original short stories. So 3 out of the 30 stories are on ADD. It's also in my first 3 books I talk about ADD. So it's just really, I think, more education, understanding, maybe understanding your partner and what he or she goes through, and I think that's the main thing, is just learning about it and understanding.
I think that's your next book, Dr. Corona, is relationships and ADHD, because it's a toughie.
There are books about that. There are specific books about relationships with ADD. I haven't written them, but there are books out there. So that's maybe finding out a book. I can't remember the author of it.
I've read a few, and they are very eye-opening and informational and educational in terms of how to navigate through a relationship with somebody who has ADHD, because it is incredibly frustrating. I know that because I'm the person who's doing it. So I've had to educate myself on, better communication. And sorry, but taking my medication. Like, my man knows, he says, "Have you been taking your medication?" And I get so mad. I'm like, "I'm taking Neurogum."
I'm taking mind education, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, "Is it working?" I don't know if it is. And I get really mad. And then I'll call you. "Hi, it's me again." Speaking of your book, I'd like to walk through your book, the Corona Protocol.
Yeah, so I mean, backing up to when I first started writing, so going back to 2000 to 2002, when I transitioned my practice, at the time I was thinking, why aren't other doctors seeing this? Why am I not seeing primary care doctors doing this? And why am I not seeing psychiatrists, the supposedly specialists, doing things the way I'm doing it? The way I've learned how to do things. I don't see other doctors doing it. So I thought, I need to start putting this on paper. Who's going to believe some family doctor about this subject unless I write a book? So I've set out to write a book. And after 4 years and 800 pages, I thought, okay, this is too much for one book. So I'm going to split it into 2 books. So I thought, okay, this is 1, this is 2. So then I released the 1, and then I started working on more on the 2. And then by the end of another 3 or 4 years, I was up to another 800 pages on book 2. So, okay, we'll split that, and then now book 3. So I basically just kept writing for 12 years to release those 3 books. I took a little short break from writing, and then I thought, what do I want to do now in my career? I love practice. I want to keep that, but I want to teach. I think the need out there is for doctors to learn about this subject, and they're not getting the training they need to get from their reading or whatever. So I thought I'm gonna set up a training course. So I wrote 2 smaller books that haven't been released yet, that I'm probably going to release in the next year or so, for doctors. So, well, actually, doctors, there's physician assistants, nurse practitioners. Focus on primary care. I love psychiatrists to also read it, to understand, read the 2 books, and then I'm going to set up a training course. So then I thought, now what? I want to write another book. I want to write 1 more book, and that's it. And I thought, I want to make this one different. I want to make this one about storytelling. People love reading about stories. And so that was just a whole different concept, working with my editor, trying to figure out the chapters and all that, the makeup of the book. And then I just started going at it. And it took me about 4 years to finish this one. And so the concept, the front protocol basically is what I do. The protocol is really the way I've learned how to do things, my methods, in a sense. And then I thought, the crazy subtitle, a scientifically proven medical solution to stop addiction, bullying, homelessness, school shootings, and suicide, 30 years in the making. So then I thought, I want to put something on the cover that's going to pop out so people will like, what? And I wanted to choose subjects that are, that are really topical today. And all of those are usually topical. Addiction, of course. Everyone talks about addiction nowadays. Bullying is a huge thing. Homelessness, we hear about that, and we see it all the time. School shooting, we've had a couple in the last week or 2, Suicide, obviously the worst outcome for a patient with mental health issues. So I thought I put those 5 on there just because I thought this was gonna be the core of the book. And so that's kind of the middle of the book is talking about those things. What I do in this book, I talk about a subject that starts with anxiety disorder, I talk about depression, bipolar, ADD, eating disorders, schizophrenia. I talk about a myriad of things, PTSD. And what I do is I talk about a subject briefly in a couple, maybe 2, 3 pages worth, and then I launch into the story. And
Okay.
that's kind of the book is it's storytelling. Then section 5 of the book is I tell my story. Then section 6, I kind of tell about some of the difficulties I've gone through personally and the struggles I've gone through, and I've made it to the other side. So that's what basically the core of what the book's about.
I'd love to talk about your personal journey, like the struggles that you had. Is that something you can talk about, or?
I don't know if I want to ruin the book for people who haven't read it yet.
Okay, so I'm gonna give people a small snippet, like a commercial, and let them know that you've had your own struggles.
I take medications too. I have my own, yeah. And I I tell the whole story in section 6 of my book. If someone wants to read all the ins and outs of what I went through and how I kind of got through that. So I kind of I wanted to put that section in because even though it's difficult to talk about those things, I thought, hopefully then people can relate to that. To say, look, even the guy who treats this stuff, even, so that's why it's like there's no reason for stigma. There's no reason to be ashamed about this stuff. I'm not ashamed of what I, and so that's why I put that section in.
I think it's important, and to give the audience just a little snippet, you had your own breakdown. Is that correct?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and you go through and tell the story and how you got to the other side, and I think it's a really great story. It's again one of the things that made me fall in love with Dr. Corona and come to your office was you were so authentic about your own journey and your own struggles and how you got to the other side and how you take medication. It just made me feel so much better. I think that reading your book and these stories will make anyone who has any of these mental disorders, because it will make them feel like they're not alone. You are not alone. You're in that. That's why I love you so much, is because you truly make patients feel like they're not alone and that there is help and that you're not ridiculous. But I do want to say, can you go into a little bit of, I personally have children at my studio that deal with bullying. What are you talking about in the bullying? And you say solution to stop it.
Well, I think just recognizing it. I think the story I talk about is a family, and the daughter is bullied at school as well as the son is bullied at school. The mom is bullied at the school board meeting, but she has very strong views that are opposed to some of the other people in the community. And so just basically with bullying that that you're not alone, and also you need to stand up to it, and if you need to get help, it's not weak to get a teacher or the principal and tell them that what's going on here, that someone needs to step in and stop this, or the bully's parents need to be notified or something. I stopped short of saying that if someone wants to fight you, that you fight back. Well, that's an option, is fighting it out. But rather than that, I think just being aware that it's so common, and again, just really more, it's mostly trying to find people who will listen to the person and saying that I'm very uncomfortable with this, and I mean, of course, the victim can try to avoid the bullies as much as they can, but if it's at a school, they can only avoid them for so long,
Right. And now throw in social media, where in the old days when we were younger, you could go home and it's done, but it continues sometimes on social media.
And then social media. I mean, there's so much shaming and bullying on social media sites, and it's just I mean, social media and very, there's good parts of it, obviously, people communicating and all that. But there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of toxicity that goes on, and with young people too, if they spend too much time on there, and it just a lot of wasted time. They should be out. And, but yeah, a lot of that happens throughout. And then again, and at a national level too. There's, you know, with politicians and this and that. I mean, there's just bullying is just, you know, so common.
It doesn't go away. It's so crazy. Like I was explaining to the kids, and like I'm gonna say something that's probably not gonna be very popular, but I do think that the bullying word is kind of thrown around at some point. It was a little bit too much. I'm like, people are gonna have disagreements. However, when it becomes overbearing and constant, yes, it's bullying. And I think, I don't know if you know who Patrick Bet David is. I was listening to his podcast and he was talking about how he only lets his kids get on I guess his kids don't have cell phones. They're the only ones that don't. And he's very strict about how much social interaction they have online. And I think that that's where it starts. I actually think that kids shouldn't have cell phones. If they need to get in touch with them, they give them a pager.
I agree. I agree. Because I think, you know, and then this is a conversation at schools too, where they, you know, that a lot of parents say take this big phone away when they're in class, but otherwise they're going to be sitting with the teacher on their phone, laying on the phone when they're supposed to be listening to the teacher. There's a lot of that, and then the parents' argument is like, well, what if they need something? They need to be able to call me. It's like, okay, well, they can go to the office and really just there's other ways of doing it, and so that you know than that, and so. Yeah, I agree. That's just good parenting. I think it's just if you just let them. Same thing like with video games. Mostly that's a guy thing, but with video games, you know, just limiting it is okay. You can do it for a half hour, or you do it for an hour. Then you gotta get your homework done, and then, or if you get your homework done, then I'll give you an hour. But that's it. You know that just this, and on the weekend or whatever, just a smart amount. And then don't so many kids are sitting there all day, every day, 8 hours and hours and hours doing video games. You know, it's not healthy. It's not
healthy. And I was talking to somebody yesterday that kind of had a rough childhood, and here's my biggest takeaway on what I've seen as somebody who is in the child industry. Like I have a performing arts center. I'm an after school program. I have seen kids do so much better because they are part of something bigger than themselves. After school programs should be funded by the state. I 1000% believe, and it's my understanding nowadays that it's not really funded very well, and you have to have a lot of money to be in a football team. And when I was younger, growing up in foster care, I lived for my after school programs. That's where I had connection. Right. And I really believe that if you give kids connection, not on the internet, outside, playing football, playing chess, doing it as bird watching, whatever it is, they're a part of something bigger than themselves. They are a part of a community. They're part of a team. And maybe we would see less shootings and bullying and stuff like that, because you're not left to your own defenses. We're all going to, listen, if we're on the internet, we're going to go to the things when you're younger that are, maybe spooky or weird or, horror shows. And if you're out and about, you don't get that option. It's just not there. So obviously there's a fine line, which you probably know, between overdoing it with your kids with activities every day, all day, every second of the day, than having something at least twice a week to go to be a part of. So
yeah, and that's what I did. Growing up, I played football since I was young, and I played chess.
Of course you did. You're a big guy.
Speaking of chess, I was in tournaments and stuff. I love chess growing up.
Really? That's so awesome. Of course, you're smart, tall. It's great. That's not a surprise.
And reading, I've read probably hundreds of books. I've been an avid reader since I was young, and so I'm on a book now. I'm on page like 520 of a 900 something page book right now. But I'm always, even late in the evening when I'm home, I read. I watch a little TV and then I stop. I go, enough TV, enough one show's enough or whatever. And then I read, and so yeah. And I think back then, we used to go out and play. And now people will say, yeah, but it's not as safe nowadays. For good points. You don't want your kids outdoors in unsafe areas unsupervised too much, because there's always the dangers, of course, out there and criminals. But I think it's just when I grew up, it was just just a healthier environment back in the 70s and in the 80s during college or stuff. Things were just like it was different back then. We didn't have all these modern stuff that we have now, and I think it was just healthier.
the internet is a great thing in moderation, like anything, right?
Exactly.
I wanted to go back to, let me go back to your book for a second. What role does the neurochemical imbalances play in the challenges highlighted in your book? How can they be effectively treated?
I do talk about that in the book about medications. I talk about that also in my first books, obviously, probably more detail in my first books. But yeah, I think so. Basically, if someone can visualize this, so the whole nervous system, the brain's the center, is composed of over 100 billion nerve cells. They're called neurons, and they connect. They communicate through spaces, and chemicals are traveling from cell to cell around the system about 1,000 times a second. The spaces in between the cells we call synapses. There's over 100 trillion of those neurons. And so the problem is where the chemicals are passing from cell to cell, there are little holes called receptors that allow the chemicals to travel from one cell into the next cell. And that's what's supposed to happen, is a one-way transmission of these chemicals. What happens in the cell is these holes they get leaky. So you get leaky holes. They become almost like two-way valves instead of one-way. So that way, sometimes it goes forward, sometimes they go backwards. So that's the problem. So when we say neurochemical imbalances, that's what that means. The chemicals in the nervous system going out of balance. That's what that means. So how do we fix it? Well, what we do is we fix the leaks. So it really is about working on the cell membrane of the cell and fixing the problem at the source of the problem. So it's not a lack of chemicals. So people have this notion that I'm going to boost my serotonin or I'm going to boost my dopamine. I guess in a sense you're boosting it forward, yes, but it's not adding chemicals to the system that aren't there. Medications are actually trying to fix the problem, and then which basically forces the chemicals to move only the one way they're supposed to move, ideally, and not go the wrong way. So that's what medications are about, and that's why they're not addictive. They're not, because they're just fixing a problem. And I think, like I said, there's a lot of things in medicine that we fix with medications, sometimes thyroid, blood pressure, a lot of things out there. And we're fixing a problem that the body just doesn't fix on its own. In the case of some of these things like blood pressure, cholesterol, then we can deal with some pretty serious things, strokes, heart attack. When we don't treat neurochemical imbalances, then you're dealing with persistent anxiety, persistent depression, ADD untreated, dysfunction, people not performing well at work, getting fired because the boss, said you're not performing up to par, your peers are producing more than you are, and because the person not treating their ADD. So how are they supposed to keep up with someone who doesn't have ADD if they don't treat it?
If I can say for listeners who don't have ADHD but might be in a relationship with somebody who does, what I'm getting from what you just said, which is absolutely amazing, is say you have a leaky boat and you're sitting there trying to scoop out the water because you have holes in the boat, and you're scooping out the water with the NeuroGum, with all these other things, but then to try to fix the actual boat, to plug those holes, that's what the medication is. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
I like the boat one. That's the new one for me. Yeah, the boat's good. I use a shower analogy. I say if you're taking a shower and all of a sudden the water pressure comes down, you're like, what's going on? You look down the faucet, the big leak coming out of the faucet. Well, what do? Well, you can't fix that right now, right? So you turn the volume up of the water as high as you can so that you can finish your shower. But then you got to realize, okay, I got to fix what's going on at the faucet there. There's a leak going on there. If you don't fix the leak, you're going to still have problems with the water. And so I say, what medications do? They go right to that leak. They fix the leak at the faucet. All of a sudden, you do that. All of a sudden, the water's pressure. If you fix the leak in the boat, the water stops going into the boat to be able to have to scoop it out. Why are you scooping it out when why don't you just focus on fixing that dang leak?
Where primarily I've been asking you questions sort of from the adult perspective. As far as kids and ADHD, do you feel like there are people out there that might be either misdiagnosing? And what are your thoughts on kids taking, it's a lot to wrap your head around, I know, on these medications because I wish when I was younger, I would have had it because probably would have saved me a lot of trauma. But what are your thoughts?
Well, it depends on the training. As family doctors, we're trained to treat it. Pediatricians are supposed to treat it. Some of them don't. Now, you obviously have to go to someone who's trained to know how to know what they're doing. Part about the reason I wanted to set up a training force is for that very reason that doctors need more training. They need to know more. And so my goal is to try to teach as much as I can. But see, ADD has nothing to do with intelligence, so it has to do with focus. And so some people are highly intelligent, but they just can't take the intelligence and make it translate into the grades or at a work level, work performance. But so some kids can skate by okay for a while because of their natural intelligence and if they're in their work ethic. So then at some point, it gets more difficult, whether it's middle school, high school, college, grad school, whatever. The more you go into school, the more difficult it gets, the more challenging it becomes for an ADD person. Now, some people will say, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible! Giving a kid a pill. Oh my gosh, what are you kidding? He's just a kid. She's just a kid. Why would you do it?" Well, because you really want that person, suffering through their brain. You want that person to be frustrated throughout their school experience, and if you can give them someone, and what's established as far as starting point, most experts will say the youngest they would give is probably around 7 years old or so. Some go that's 5 or 6 years old because it's pretty apparent usually at a young age kids who have ADD. And then some will say the argument is like, well, kids are hyper anyway, so you're just going to take a hyper kid and just zone them out. No, that's not the point. We're not taking away the personality of a person. And if we're blunting a personality, that's the wrong medication, that's too high of a dose. You have to watch the appetite of a kid because you don't want to dose it too high where they're growing and they need to maintain their appetite. But medicating kids I think it's hugely important. And I have so many patients and families who are grateful because all of a sudden everything turns around for this kid, and confidence improves. And there's also been shown statistically, if you don't treat ADD, there's a higher chance of drug addiction later in life, a higher chance of getting in trouble because you do things impulsively. And so now we're dealing with, that's why I think you treat it whenever you diagnose it and you just keep treating it. And people will say, until when? Well, until when you want to stop. You want to stop it when you go to work? Oh, no, I can stop it now because I'm not going to school anymore. Well, okay, but aren't you going to get a job? Yeah, but don't you need it when you're working? Well, maybe. Okay, good. So, okay, well, when can I stop it now? Well, when are you retiring? No time real soon. Okay, we'll take it till you retire, and then we'll talk again about it. Then you retire and say, you can stop it if you don't have any work to focus on. But some people say, I just feel so good when I take it. I just feel better. Oh. There's more to get done than just work and school. There's other stuff to do too. But that's basically the controversy that shouldn't be. Well, it's a controlled substance. So, oh my gosh, you're gonna give a kid a controlled substance. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to treat him properly, if you want to treat him in the best way with the best type of treatment, sure, absolutely. I can go on about ADD because it's a topic I'm passionate about, because
Same.
It's way, way underdiagnosed. And people will say the opposite. People say it's overdiagnosed, too many people are taking these things wrong. The government might say that, and that's why the government is trying to control the production of stuff. But absolutely not. I think it's way underdiagnosed. I think way more people that have it that don't treat it than actually do treat it.
Well, there's a stigma, that's probably why they're not. I'm with you. I agree with you. And to go to your point earlier about a kid suffering, I work with children, have for 20, 30 years now. And I part of the reason why I think my studio does so well is that we're very involved with trying to help. Everyone's a snowflake, at our studio, and we try to treat each child differently because they have different wants and needs. One of those things is watching kids suffer when they, and we have lines, I do musical theater. You can see somebody who is very smart, but just can't focus. And I've seen kids go from, they can't get a lead because they can't memorize lines, but they try. And then suddenly something will change and the parent will come to me and say, okay, I just want to let you know that we're trying this new medication. Can you please give us some feedback? And I'm like, absolutely. And I'll say, wow, Jimmy, Sally, they are focused. They're, and it makes me want to cry. It's like, they're not suffering. They're living the life that they should, that they can, and they're going to flourish. And, is it for everyone? Maybe not. There's no reason for the interruptions, the constant talking, the not raising the hand, the running all over the place. It's like, wow. And I'm like, I get to the point where I almost have to say, if you're not going to help me and give me some tools, I got to let you go. That you're hurting the other children in the class, and now that's hurting that poor child. Does that make sense at all?
You're right, and that's the challenge with parents is feeling just like you're not being a bad parent by treating
Right.
things.
It's not their fault. It's not their fault.
Yeah,
Or they don't. You're not wrong. You're not an a-hole because you want to go get your kid a better life. On another note, and I'll stop talking because I keep talking again. I'm also passionate about it too, Dr. Corona. But my nephew he has diabetes, and he was diagnosed at 7 years old. He ended up in the hospital. He has to take this insulin every day. He has to wear a thing, and his life is better now. Isn't that the same though?
absolutely. But see, people think that's different because that's a real medical problem with blood tests. See, so people will think that's real. This AD is not real, and you're giving a kid a controlled substance. That's terrible. No, it's not. Kids already growing up comparing themselves to other kids, and so they sometimes feel less than because it's like, how come I can't do as well as these kids are doing? I thought I'm as smart as they are. How come I can't perform the way? Well, because you're not able to. It's just not possible. And so it's huge growing up is self-esteem. You don't have esteem that this causes a lot of problem in life. And so so for every reason, there's no good reason not to, except that again, parents will talk to other parents, they'll go online, they'll look stuff up, they'll look up, the side effects of things, not focusing on the benefit, but focusing on what the government is saying and the side effects are. And, and so they, just focus on the wrong things and you get sidetracked. Instead of going on the internet, why don't you go to a doctor you trust who treats this? And the doctor can tell you the ins and outs of what to look for, what side effects to watch for. I can do that in a much better way than someone trying to research it on their own and trying to figure it out on their own, which is fine. You can research, but you got to watch what you read because, what people get the wrong. There's 3 sources of information. I tell people, it's kind of a funny thing that there's 3 first sources of information you never get medically. Number 1, internet. Internet's terrible source of medical information. There's so much misinformation. There's this and that are saying the completely different thing. Well, which one of those is right? So there's a lot of opinion. There's a lot of governmental nonsense. And so I tell people, if you want to get medical advice from an attorney, go on there. The second is family and friends. Is that really the best source?
Yeah.
No. The third is pharmacists. Do you want to get your medical information from pharmacists? Absolutely not, because they're not clinicians. They don't prescribe. They don't understand. They'll just give you negativity, like pharmacists will do. And so that's it. So what does that have? What's left after those 3? The expert maybe, or the doctor that you trust. That's the person you get information from. I've treated ADD for over 30 years. I can tell you the ins and outs of it. I can tell you the side effects to watch for. I can tell you why that is too high of a dose, why you need to lower it, whatever. I can help with that, but because I do it and I see the results constantly. And and that's a much better source of information than anything else, in my opinion.
At the end of the day, I know parents they want the best for their kids. And so you're right. Sometimes misinformation will bring you down the wrong path of trying to give that great life to their children. So I think it's amazing that you're starting a teaching program. To talk to us a little bit about the teaching and the program course that you're going to be starting.
Yeah, so basically my focus is going to be on primary care doctors. There's a lot of physician assistants or practitioners, family doctors, pediatricians, anyone who is able to treat these conditions. So my idea is to do something very unique and never been done before. So an online training program, meaning that, okay, let's say, for example, I get a new patient, I find, maybe I screen, make sure it's a good teaching phase, make sure it's an interesting phase. So basically what I do is have the person come online with all the other, whoever else is online with me. And I take a history. I talk to the patient and ask a bunch of questions. Then I open it up and say, does anyone else have any questions? And then once we have everyone satisfied with the information, the person exits the scene. And then we talk about it. And they say, okay, let's talk about it. Let's go around. Let's say, what do you think about what's the diagnosis? What's the treatment plan, et cetera? So we all go around, everyone, and then I make a final decision. And then what we do is we follow it. So then they'd be, okay, let's see the person back in a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And so it's kind of like an ongoing online clinic. And then follow up patients, new patients. So basically seeing patients and treating them with other doctors, witnessing what I'm doing live in a sense, and then seeing the results. And then it's all teaching. So in other words, is they, okay, well, I chose Prestige instead of Lexapro. Here's why I did that. And I know this other person wanted Lexapro. Well, the problem with Lexapro is they probably wouldn't give them this kind of result. Anyway, can use it all as this is why I chose this medication. Okay, I was wrong. This medication didn't work out. I had to change it. But it's all learning because I'm always learning. I mean, every patient is different. I have to figure out each person individually. So it's not always, we don't always make the correct decision every time. We have to, okay, let me back up. That wasn't it. Let me see what might work. So it's a lot of trial and error. But it's rational trial. It's not just throwing darts at the dartboard. There's a logic to what I do. And there's a specific way I do things. But that's what I want to do with teaching. Because I think to give back, I can only see so many people. There's so many people around that don't have access to a doctor who understands this, and they're kind of stuck. And just think about rural areas. Think about areas where they don't have, access to medical care as much. So I want to be able to reach doctors all over the place, hopefully, and teach them to help their patient.
Is this going to be an online course or?
No.
Yeah, that's great. And when can you expect to launch that?
It's a good question. I haven't really in the details of how to set it up and everything. What I want to do. I'm not sure if I release the 2 books first and then set one up, or do I make the books part of the course? I don't really know yet.
It sounds like, honestly, Dr. Corona, like it sounds amazing, and I think a great opportunity for it's like you said, there's a lot of people out there not diagnosed yet, maybe possibly because they don't have the information that you're offering.
I love talking about it. I love teaching, and I'm constantly teaching every day because I'm teaching my patients. I'm teaching my patients to understand their condition. Look, I want you to understand why you're taking this pill. It's not just you're taking this pill for no reason. You're taking it for this reason, and this is exactly what it does. Here's what it does on my diagram. Here's what the Adderall does. Here's what this does. And so that's why both of them have their role. They both do totally different things, but they work together. And so there's a lot of coexistence with anxiety and ADD, depression, ADD. ADD coexists with a lot of other things, bipolar disorder. You have to treat everything the person has. If someone comes in with high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease, I'm just going to treat the diabetes. I'm just going to treat the blood pressure. I'm just going to do that. No, you got to look at all those things. You have to look at the big picture and then treat the whole person, not just treat one thing. And then, okay, that's enough. Next visit, we'll start working on your high blood pressure. Oh, I know it's super, super high. Oh yeah, you're at risk for a stroke or a bleed. But, well, no, we'll do that. No, you got to treat everything together. That's what I do in my practice. I look at every diagnosis, make sure every one of the diagnoses is treated properly. A lot of my patients are on 2 to 3 things, probably the average. And we have to get people comfortable and say, well, I only want to take one thing. Well, how much better do you want to get? You really want to limit yourself to one pill when you can get better with the second one. And some more complex people, some of the bipolar patients who are more difficult to treat, they may be on 3, 4, 5, 6 meds. Some of them, they have a really tough one that has serious implications, like some of the serious bipolar disorder out there. You got to treat it, or the person's going to self-destruct. Yeah, so it's important to make sure that that every person, every individual is in what we call full remission. Remission means completely well. My gauge of completely well is you feel like your old self. Now, when I ask the question old self, the most common answers are childhood. Now, that's if you have maybe a really happy, carefree childhood, not like what you had. But if you had like a really happy, maybe kind of childhood, or a lot of people will say late teens, early mid-20s. Why then? Out of high school, starting career, maybe starting college, starting whatever, before marriage or kid, before life gets more complicated. So there's sometimes times, and I ask people, are you back to where you told me the first visit that this was? Are you there? I'm pretty close to there. What's missing? This or that? Okay, let's work on that. are you? Yeah, I'm there again. Or I either get, I'm there again, or you know what? No. Because even at those times of life, I never felt like this good. This is the best I've ever felt. So all those answers are great. All of this means is the remission.
To add to that, and you're absolutely right, that's how I feel when when I'm taking what I need to take. I feel like $1,000,000, and I feel like I'm brighter. I'm focused. You're absolutely right. I feel like right now in my life, it feels like the best I've felt ever. And I'm sure there's been other times, but like it's because I called you back up for the 90th time, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm taking, the medications that I have, and I don't feel, and I finally, at 50 years old, at 50 something years old, I finally don't give a shit. I'm done caring about people, like what they think. This is how God in the universe, source, whatever you believe in, you are here as a gift. You have been given your best self. Your obligation is to live that life the best that you can, and give to others and just shine. And if you're not doing that because you just feel like you're caring about what other people, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm done. And I'm like, why do I go back to that where everything's all over the place? I don't know where my keys are. I don't know where I'm going. What was I missed it. There's nothing worse than missing an appointment because you didn't write it down. And so it feels great. You hit the
And
nail on the
again,
head.
it's because it's normality. It's you're feeling a normality, and people think that after a normality for a period of time, people think, where am I taking these again? I'm fine. I don't.
Oh, that's exactly. I'm like, I don't need these. I remember, like, this is gonna sound really weird, but Britney Spears, and I'm gonna wrap up, but Britney Spears would say this, and I remember thinking at that time when I was younger, like, she's like, I feel good, so I stopped taking everything, and then I go to kaputs again, and then she goes back on, and I'm like, gosh darn it, took me till I was 50 to realize that. Before we go, I just wanted to kind of wrap things up, and I say again, thank you so much for taking your very busy time to spend it with us. If you could share one key takeaway from the Corona Protocol with our audience, what would that be?
Well, what I hopefully when someone reads the book, they can see something in there that oh my God, that sounds like me. So I want the takeaway to be that these things are extremely common. I think at least a quarter, probably half the population has something that's in this book. So I think people realize how common it is, and don't be ashamed to treat this. And it's not as scary as you might think it is, But again, I think it just, I want people to have hope that no matter where you're at, no matter what you have, any kind of issue that I talk about in the book, it's all treatable. It's all easily treatable, And you just, you want to make sure and be your best self. And I call this the true self. Again, this is the real Tracey. It's not Tracey unmedicated. You're still Tracey, but this is the healthy, underlying, real person that you are. So that's what I want for everyone out there. And if you don't have any conditions, great. But you know what? Maybe you can find someone in your life that does, and give them some hope, and educate and say, hey, you know what? Maybe there's help for this, right? And so maybe you recognize someone in your family or friends, and you want to get to that person and give them some hope.
Yes. Well, quick rapid fire, just to end on a fun note, is what is your favorite comfort food?
Oh boy, my favorite comfort food. Well, I love tamales. We have them every Christmas. And my probably favorite number one food I don't get very often is king crab legs.
Really? Okay. What is your favorite smell?
Oh boy. Cuban cigar.
Really? Love it. I love it.
I have a sweet. I have a Cuban cigar once a week, and on Friday evening.
Wow. See, I learned something new about you. Well, thank you, Dr. Corona. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, all of your expertise. For anyone out there listening, all of his information, Dr. Corona's information, will be in the description. His books, everything else, his show, of course. And from now, I just want to tell everyone, you are awesome. Stay edgy, stay ageless, and you are legendary.